let's maybe take a deeper dive on who is it? Who are the teams? Who are the 8 teams that we're going to be getting a close look at during this tournament in July? We did a lot in covering the build up to this moment. There was the qualifying rounds that took place in February and April. Lisa mentioning that these teams winning their groups to cement their place in this tournament in July. Now we've got Group A and Group B. Lisa, I'm going to go to you first here with Group A. It consists, or excuse me, of a Group B. It consists of Canada, Costa Rica, Panama, Trinidad, and Tobago. When we're looking across these 4 teams, who is standing out for you? Who are you going to be keeping a close eye at? Is there anyone within here who you see maybe causing a little bit of disruption?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this Group B, heavy hitters are Canada, right? They're coming off of a gold at the Tokyo Olympics. And when you look at Panama and Trinidad and Tobago, there are 2 nations that are looking for their first World Cup bid. They've never been to a World Cup, and this is their chance. This is their opportunity. If they finish second in this group, they have a chance to get through. They then move on to the qualifying for that. So I think a team like Panama and Trinidad and Tobago are going to be looking to fight for anything they can in this. I could give the upper hand to Panama between those two, just in what they were able to do throughout qualifying. But honestly, it's Canada for me in this one. This is a team that is coming off of a gold. They haven't played too much entirely with their whole squad together. I'm sorry, like full starting squad. They played one over this last international break, one little friendly that they had. But these are players that for United States fans that you see in the NWSL week in and week out. And to have these Canadian players back together, competing in these qualifying, looking to go from winning gold to winning the World Cup. I think Canada is the heaviest hitter here. They didn't have to play in qualifying, but do they have all the pieces to compete at this type of level? And does Canada know what they're really getting into going up against teams like Costa Rica and Panama in particular? Because Costa Rica, this is the team that can come out and surprise you in what they do. Like, they have their moments where they sit back, but Costa Rica can attack and they can get into their offensive end of the field and put pressure on teams. And if a team like Canada gets too stretched out, that's an opportunity for the Costa Ricas and the Panamas to sneak in behind and in between those lines. But this is an interesting group. I think it's the easier of the 2 groups in my sense. But just, when you look at the other one with Mexico and Jamaica, Haiti, and the United States, like that, those are some heavy hitters in that one. But it's got to be Canada, right? They're the top dogs coming into this. Can they remain on top, keep a good goal differential, really show the world what they've been working on in the last year since the Olympics?
Lindsey, how about you? I'm going to Group A with you on this one. Like Lisa mentioned, the big heavy hitters, USA leading the way in that group. You got the host, Mexico, Jamaica, and Haiti in this one. Who are you looking at as favorites? Who are you looking at to disrupt some things in Group A?
Yeah, listen, I think the USA is the heavy favorites, right, in that group with expectations. Look at our young players that are coming in already who've been performing terrifically in the NWSL and on a consistent basis. So we have some new vibes coming into the team, but you can say the same about Mexico, right? You can say the same about Mexico. You can say the same about Jamaica. Haiti has scored a ton of goals in qualifying. Jamaica has experienced the 2019 World Cup. However, I think it's still a little bit interesting with them not playing any games, just being in camp leading up to this. How does that affect them in terms of, again, their cohesion when they step foot into qualifying? But Mexico's good.
Yeah.
Lisa mentioned at home, that does, I've talked about our experience back in 2010 qualifying and playing in the semifinal against them and then losing and having to go play a play-in game for Italy and being the last team to get into the 2011 World Cup. So there's so many little details that will come into play in this qualifiers just because of the level of play has risen so much, and there'll be nuances to the games But yeah, when I look at Mexico, even just looking at Jimena Lopez, Maria Sanchez, and Diana Ordonez, who play in the in the NWSL, right? There's 3 players that are playing consistently against the U.S. competition day in and day out. So this is gone are the days, right, where people are showing up and being intimidated by the U.S. I think there's a real desire to implement each team's style of play and, adjusting as needed, as you typically would within game and prior. But I'm excited. I think this is a tough group, and it's not going to be easy, but I'm excited about the competition.
Oh
Yeah, I'm with you both. I think there's excuse me, I think you're looking across both of these groups, and I think knowing that these teams have to play each other once within the group, that there's opportunity within some of those specific games to where certain teams can shock another team or steal points off another. I mean, I think you look at Group B, and I'm looking at maybe Costa Rica and Panama and seeing how that's gonna shake out in terms of who's gonna walk away with a win, or if there's the makings of a draw in something like that. Looking at something like Mexico and Jamaica, these are 2 teams who play each other pretty tough, pretty closely whenever they get a chance to go head to head. So is Jamaica maybe looking at themselves in a group where they have a tough group, in maybe their opinion, to sort of try to navigate through to sort of clinch one of those top 4 spots for the World Cup, and say, these are the areas where we really have to target. Is it going to be versus Haiti? Is it going to be versus Mexico as the host? So I'm looking for those sort of kind of matchups in the group stage to sort of really kind of shake things up, even despite looking at them both and saying, like, hey, here's a favorite here and here's a favorite there. It's really going to, I think, come down to minute by minute in these types of tournaments. When we're looking at general teams to watch here, I think, speaking a little bit about this off mic and then bringing it now here onto the show, we maybe even talked about this during when we were doing our qualifier episodes, and then the Concacaf draw episodes as well. We talked about, like, maybe there's who are the big 3 coming in to this type of tournament, and at some point or another in various episodes, we've kind of agreed mostly that it's this trifecta of the moment between US, Canada, and Mexico, and we are bringing up these 3 teams in particular because we also have been able to see these teams in action recently. So we're watching the U.S. women's national team get sort of their final prep against Colombia, a team that's also preparing for their CONMEBOL World Cup qualifier in Copa America. We've got Canada playing games during the international window at the end of June, and Mexico as well, who are facing off against Peru during their international window. But there's a number of teams that we aren't seeing in action in the lead up to this CONCACAF championship. And I think maybe we wanted to have a moment on this episode to talk about that a little bit. So while we're incredibly excited to watch all 8 of these teams go head to head, and while we can certainly sit here and say, look at these areas of improvement in some of these programs, there's also some things that we're looking at and saying, okay, there's some areas here where we can see that there are programs going into this championship that still need some support, that still need some resources. And we're wondering how that's going to impact them during this championship in July. We were talking a little bit about not seeing Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica's and their reggae girls, they have camps that are currently taking place right now, and I believe in Colorado, but not being able to see them get some action against international competition just before they have to head to Mexico themselves. I do wonder a little bit how that's going to come into play or impact them going into this tournament in July. Lori, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly. One of the teams that we're talking about, and specifically, was Jamaica, right? And a bit surprised that they weren't playing any games. There was a lot of talk leading up to the 2019 World Cup and how difficult it was for them to get over to France and some of the resources that weren't being presented to them. So you wonder how much of that is coming into play. But I am also curious, too. obviously with not having an international match, but are they playing local boys teams? Is that a different direction they decided to go? Would that give them a different challenge? Those are some of the questions I have that I don't actually have answers to. But yes, I mean, I think when you look at this in general with a limited time for all of these teams, chemistry and coming together quickly with this lead up just about a week out is going to be necessary for all these teams. So it's, you don't love to see it, but I mean, just doing some of the research prior to this, it looked like it was Jamaica, Panama, and even Trinidad and Tobago were maybe the 3 teams that weren't playing any games since April. So yeah, what does their camps look like? Are they playing any other matches that we just aren't privy to? But yeah, that poses a real interesting question, because as we saw in the first half again for the U.S. and then as you were talking about as well with Mexico, it took a little bit of both those squads to be able to come together and kind of build into the game. And when you talk about little details being big factors in these types of tournaments and more on the line, then you don't actually have that type of time to get into the games, right? No. And qualifying, especially when teams, and my last point on this is, presents different challenges for everyone. Like Canada's going to present a different challenge for the US than Mexico, vice versa, right? So there's a lot of things at play, and how do you adjust? And sometimes that requires tactical adjustments, and sometimes that requires personnel adjustment.
So, and also like these nations aren't playing games, but they are getting together, right? We know Jamaica is at their camp. We also have to look at the turnover and player personnel for all of these teams, because it's a huge conversation in the US with the United States women's national team about the player turnover and getting that rhythm together. And these nations did play in the qualifiers in February, but that was a long time ago. And depending on where players are in their club or collegiately, what they did this year, to have those minutes, not just playing inter squad scrimmages at these training camps, is a huge advantage and then disadvantage for some of these nations that aren't having the opportunity to play against competition. Even in Canada, they played one friendly against South Korea and they ended up tying 0-0 in this international break before that. But I can guarantee you that they learned a lot in that match, and that the players having rhythm together and getting minutes under their belt is super helpful. So the advantages are already swaying one way or another for some of these nations before they even get to Monterrey, Mexico. And I mean, that's a whole other topic about federations and funding and things like that. But it's a factor that definitely comes into play. And to the advantage of some of these nations, they can watch Canada play against South Korea. They can watch Mexico play, and they have more scouting opportunities. I mean, the United States is one of the most easily scouted teams because of the quantity of matches that they play and how accessible that is for people to be able to rewatch those and get analysis on it. So now for these nations, I mean, when you look at like Haiti and Jamaica, like they should be watching the United States and seeing what's happening in these friendlies against Colombia, because that's a great way to read your opponents in your competition. Whereas the US, they don't have that against Jamaica because they didn't play a public competition. So the benefits go hand in hand here. And the US knows that they are easily scouted, but if other teams can take advantage of that, that's going to be a huge, huge leg up for them as they head into these qualifiers.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up, because there's a lot of footage out there for these teams to access on the U.S. women's national team. But I think more importantly, there's going to be very recent footage with their 23-player roster that they're calling into this Concacaf W Championship. So I would imagine that these couple of games against Colombia are going to be on the radar, and a little bit more recent footage that they're going to be keeping an eye on going into this tournament, because these are going to be the 23 players that they're going to be facing up against.